Talk about cells, specifically plant cells and animal cells. Of course, plant cells are cells found within any plant. Animal cells are any cell found within an animal, such as, well, us. First, let's take a look at the shape of both plant cells and animal cells. Plant cells have more of a rigid shape, much like this cell I'm drawing here. Animal cells have more of an irregular shape that can definitely vary or differ from cell to cell. Here's an example of one cell. This might be a skin cell, for example. Both a plant cell and an animal cell contain something called a nucleus. The nucleus is the control center for the cell. The nucleus acts much like the brain of our cell. It controls all cellular activities. Okay, what else do plant cells and animal cells have in common? Well, they also have something called the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the outer layer of animal cells and is just inside the outer layer of plant cells right here. And the cell membrane is special because the cell membrane controls what enters and exits the cell. So it's the cell membrane. The cell membrane is a lot like a bouncer in a club. It gets to decide what comes in and what comes out of the cell. There we have it. Next we have, in both plant and animal cells, we have something called the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is like the jelly stuff on the inside of cells that kind of holds it together. Cytoplasm doesn't look like dots, but it does kind of look jelly-like, and that's what I'm trying to show here. So we have the cytoplasm here and here, all spread around inside the cells. Next, something else that plant cells and animal cells have in common. They both have something called a vacuole. Looks something like this. Okay, and plant cells, they're much larger. Okay, and animal cells, they're much smaller. Vacuoles are actually just giant storage containers that store water. Okay, and this probably explains why plant cells have so much bigger ones, because they have to survive during periods such as drought, so they can store water in that way. All right, one more thing that both plant cells and animal cells have in common are something called a mitochondria. I'll draw one here as a mitochondria. I'll draw one over here. Plant cells and animal cells can have lots of mitochondria. It depends on what type of cell they are. Mitochondria. I'll label this one too, mitochondria. Okay. Now, in both plant cells and animal cells, the mitochondria has a very special job. The job of the mitochondria is to do something, you may have heard of it, called cellular respiration, which creates energy for the cell using sugar. It turns sugar into usable energy for the cell, which is very, very important. All cells need energy to reproduce and to grow. All right, let's talk about maybe a major difference between plant cells and animal cells. Only plant cells have something called a chloroplast, which looks something like this. Here's a chloroplast. Now, a chloroplast is special because it's the spot of photosynthesis. This is the chloroplast right here. The chloroplast does photosynthesis, and the purpose of photosynthesis is to make sugar and glucose. And that chloroplast gives the sugar that it makes inside the chloroplast to the mitochondria to turn it into energy. That's why the chloroplast is very special. And I think that sums up the difference between plant cells and animal cells.